Hello, everyone, and a good morning and afternoon to those in America who are with us, and a good evening to our friends and colleagues in Qatar. I'd like to welcome our panelists and our audience in these multiple time zones to the first program in our museum series of 2022 on expanding young minds, children's museums, and youth programming. I'm Peggy Lohr, and I serve as the chairperson of the Qatar America Institute for Culture, QAIC, or QAIC, as we fondly call it. My connection to Qatar and its culture is as the former founding director of the National Museum of Qatar in Doha. It has been open now for about 3 years. First, a word about QAIC. Our role is especially to connect the culture of Qatar and the US, but we also explore the culture of the broader Arab and Islamic worlds through creative programming, working with artists and academics and a variety of professionals in the sharing of exhibitions, educational programs, film, and interactive experiences that foster cross-cultural partnerships. Today, we will hear from 3 panelists on the creative, thoughtful process of museum programming for youth and families. Now, the idea of a children's museum started in America at the turn of the last century, and the Brooklyn Children's Museum led the way. It is considered to be the first children's museum in the world. Soon after, institutions such as the Boston Children's Museum influenced the establishment of a children's museum in Brussels, others in Europe, and still others in South America. The largest children's museum in the world, and one that is loved by its community, is the Indianapolis Museum, Children's Museum, founded in about 1925. I happen to be working at the Indianapolis Museum of Art decades later, in the days of the Children's Museum's new emergence with its new building. Its programs were celebrated then and continue to be respected and admired by the profession. Of course, Lloyd Hezekiah of the Brooklyn Children's Museum and Michael Spock of the Boston Children's Museum were 2 of the early pioneers, and I'm so pleased to have known them both. We knew then, as we do now, that early interactive learning and the encouragement of play with learning encourages curiosity, makes long-term museum goers, and results in good future global citizens. Of course, in earlier days, most museums were simply not exciting for children, and that spawned a huge surge in museum education, such that major art museums and those others of other disciplines created specific programming for youth. We will engage in both of those perspectives today. I recall during my career as an art museum director that I thought certain objects in the collection would greatly appeal to children if they were presented in the right way. So over and above our children's programming, we built a special gallery and installed special objects just for them, creating an atmosphere that made them comfortable, curious, even empowered. It had low ceilings and a low entrance door. So if you were not higher than about 4 feet, you couldn't enter easily. Well, if you were 4 feet, you could enter easily, but without parents, of course, and the kids loved that. So let's introduce our panelists for their stories, their updates, and their theories. And following their presentations, we will have questions from the audience. We have with us today Hannah Elwell, who is Vice President of Exhibitions and Education at the Brooklyn Children's Museum in New York. We have Clara Lim, who is Deputy Director of Design and Development at the Dadu, the Children's Museum of Qatar, Doha. And she is our replacement this morning for Iman Al-Abdullah, who's head of schools and acting head of outreach, who was unable to make it. And our third panelist is Sheikh Nasser Al-Nasser, who is Deputy Director of Curatorial Affairs at the Museum of Islamic Art in Doha. So you can see we have both perspectives from the Children's Museum side and also from an art museum that is doing children's programming. So we begin with you, Hannah, Hannah of the Brooklyn Children's Museum, and the screen is yours.
Hello, everyone. I'm so pleased to join you today from Brooklyn, New York. I'm sorry, it'll take me just a moment. It's not clear on the screen sharing. I should have confirmed this, so give me just a moment. Here we are. Are you all able to see?
Yes.
Apologies for the delay. So pleased to join you all. from the historic, as Peggy said, the first children's museum founded in 1899. We're very proud of our long history. It represents, so many arcs of change within the field of education, ideas of progressive education and meeting families' needs and responding and engaging community have changed so much over time, and still very much remain at the core of the work that we do and the exhibits that we make and the programming that we seek to present through engagements with partners and in the service of serving family audiences. So I'm going to show and share a broad swath of images and contextual information about our exhibits and programming. And we'll be happy to answer questions about any particular areas that resonate with those of you in attendance today. So as you can see, this is our building. It is a huge yellow building within a residential neighborhood. Founded in 1899 at a time when museums were being founded on big thoroughfares on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan and Eastern Parkway, which is a big boulevard that runs through Brooklyn. Brooklyn Children's Museum was very intentionally founded within a residential neighborhood of central Brooklyn. There's an image on the left side showing early activation of our collections. We've always been a collecting institution, which is rare for children's museums globally, but particularly within the US. Our counterpart collection-based children's museums are Boston, as Peggy noted, and Indianapolis, both who draw on collections of cultural objects and natural science material. So on the right side, this is our iconic people tube, this rainbow tunnel that is usually has the thunder of children's footsteps running down it. What we do, we provide first cultural experiences that support children's growth, their socio-emotional growth, their fine and gross motor skills, their curiosity, their hands-on sensory exploration of the world in all the ways. We're inspired by the diversity of our borough and create experiences that spark curiosity and celebrate identity and cultivate joyful learning. Our program philosophy touches on much of what Peggy noted. We foster independence and discovery. We activate our collection in a very intentional and ethical way. We think it's very important to honor the journeys of the objects that we're presenting and present them within an appropriate and respectful cultural context. So we focus a lot of attention on that. And we, again, want to be responsive to and really meaningfully engage the constituents in our communities, respond to their needs, what they're looking for, and reflect a world that resonates with them through our exhibits and our programming. I'll walk you through our permanent exhibits. World Brooklyn is one of our iconic exhibits. It is a series of storefronts that represent real places in Brooklyn. Each of the places was created based on first-person narratives of the shop owners, of the families who frequent those places. And so you can see the corridor of these storefronts. There is a Chinese stationery shop. There is an international grocery store. There's a Mexican bakery, an OWA West African import store, a Caribbean travel agency, and of course a pizzeria, the iconic Brooklyn institution. We partner periodically with these places that are all still existing within Brooklyn. This is the threshold of the World Brooklyn exhibit, which begins with a transit authority bus ride. I'm sure you know how much kids love vehicles. And I'll just quickly go through some of the different interactive experiences within these particular environments. You're invited to look at a West African mask, look at the different the shapes and textures and patterns used on the mask, and then create one of your own alongside. In the Chinese stationery shop, you're invited to learn a bit about Chinese calligraphy and try your hand at it with a water brush on a slate board. Sensory opportunities abound, whether it's water, sand, cork. You can make a mess here that you aren't making at home. The exhibit called Neighborhood Nature encourages kids to think about themselves as part of the natural environment they are part of. We also do visiting exhibits in collaboration with artist partners. This was a corrugated cardboard maze in the works that we erected last summer. It was an inexpensive but very immersive opportunity for kids to explore and get lost. And we also partnered with an artist who created iconic paintings representative of landmarks in Brooklyn that people would recognize, whether it was the public library or a building landmark or the gateway to a park. And again, further examples of partnerships with artists. We worked with a local photographer who documents block parties, which are a very long-standing tradition in New York, and created an exhibit inside a block party under our roof, which was a fun time. Had opportunities for sidewalk chalk, for pretend grilling, and serving food to neighbors and friends, music making opportunities. This is our most recently erected exhibit called Brooklyn Voices, which encourages kids to think about themselves and families to think about themselves as part of history, and the voices that contribute to this collective whole that is our community. So you can hear different voices through audioscapes in the space. There's a series of interior environments that are representing, residential environments where you can engage in different kinds of role play. You see a couple of kids within the TV acting out the stories of their lives. And it's been a really wonderful intergenerational opportunity for families to share experiences. Again, we serve Central Brooklyn, which is about 850,000 people, larger than cities including Denver, Seattle, and others. So we're serving a lot of people within this small geographic area. And we are one of the few places, one of the very few, that really are specifically targeting family audiences. So I've led you through the exhibits. I'll quickly share some of the programming that we offer on a daily basis. We have an art studio called Color Lab that highlights the work of Black artists. This was partially in response to school teachers and educators, administrators expressing that there was an absence of art making spaces and that their students were not being introduced and weren't aware of artists that represented themselves, that looked like themselves. And that felt something very important. So we created the intention of this space to highlight the work of Black artists, both New York based and globally, and present their work as muse artists and do an inspired hands-on activity each month. We rotate them out. This is the studio space. You can see kids engaging in it. We offer school programs. We also offer rotating programs in a public program way. Here's a snapshot, a beautiful snapshot of activating our collections. We believe that the utility of our collection is when it's in visitors' hands. That really the tactile experience of exploring objects, looking at their patterns, their texture, their touch, their feel, their weight, that encourages both close looking, expands visual vocabulary, and really enables kids to activate their imagination to think about the path and travel of these objects. We also present a calendar of cultural festivals. We align our festivals with those marked by the Department of Education. This is an image from this past year's Lunar New Year. We partnered with the Golden Lion dancers from Chinatown, and they brought their incredible puppets to our roof for a very animated presentation. This is an image from last year's Holi celebration, the South Asian Festival of Holi. This is from Indigenous Peoples Day. We also have live animals. This is not one that's in residence at Brooklyn Children's Museum, but a special guest who came and was quite the sensation, as you can imagine. Who doesn't love to come to a children's museum and have the opportunity to engage with a pig, especially in an urban environment? most of the animals that live in our museum are reptiles. So a little more accessible, and we bring them out for hands-on programming. We also believe strongly in civic engagement. We do programming around Election Day. We're really interested in cultivating the next generation of engaged citizens, encouraging kids to really think about their voices and their themselves as having agency and being able to impact positive change in their communities. This is a dream cloud that we hung in our Color Lab Art Studio for Martin Luther King Day, and encourage families to think about their dreams for themselves and dreams for their communities, for community betterment. We have outside spaces that encourage gross motor play. This is a play structure on our rooftop. The shape of it is actually inspired by one of the two-chambered nests in our collection. And we engage educators through a number of different ways. We do object-based programming. We have created collections cases that they have brought to their classrooms. We do professional development workshops to encourage teachers to share with each other teaching strategies, how they've used these different objects in their classrooms, and have put together a set of traveling cases aligned with pre-K themes that travel through different classrooms. I don't want to be too long-winded, so I'll quickly go through the remaining slides. We engage with our community in a number of different ways. During the pandemic, while many places were doing online programming, we quickly realized that tangible programming was really our best foot forward. So we put together art activity kits that we distributed to families through our community-based partners, and families really appreciated these. Adults appreciated them as much as kids. We have partnerships with the Brooklyn Public Library. They are actually moving under our roof, and their branch will be in the same building, which will be a wonderful opportunity for shared programming. And throughout the pandemic, on the left, you see an image of a child who has gotten vaccinated. We've had a vaccination site, which for our community has been a really powerful offering and an extension of community service. And so that is it in a nutshell, a very large nutshell. The scope of programs and exhibits at Brooklyn Children's Museum.
Hannah, thank you. You know, the museum it does such a good job with programming, and you have a very strong connection to the community. I'm just wondering how you get their feedback. Do you have any kind of evaluation, or what do you do with that?
I'm so glad you asked, because that's a facet of museum work that I have really grown to deeply appreciate in the time I've been here. When we have, especially when we're working on larger grant projects, for instance, the traveling cases that have gone out into classrooms and been activated by teachers, we build in an evaluator into our grants. So we have the assurance that we will be able to really measure up the goals against the outcomes. And have both, qualitative and quantitative data points to look at the summation. We want to be reflective about our practice and to build in evaluation steps along the way to be able to iterate and pivot our energies if we find that we're missing the mark somewhere along the way. So we have worked with a number of different independent evaluators, and we also do our own evaluation when it comes to our community partners and visitor experience. As visitors are, enjoying the exhibits or coming for a targeted program, one of our cultural festivals, for instance, we're interested to hear if they are seeking celebration of that particular festival in other places, and how we might grow and expand our programming to meet their needs.
That's great. Well, thank you very much. Stand by, but there'll be more questions later, I'm sure. Okay. We're going to move on to Clara Lim, who, as I mentioned, is from Dadu, the Children's Museum in Doha, and she's Deputy Director of Design and Interpretation. So I hope she also gives us a window into the connection between the two, because design and interpretation absolutely go together, no matter what kind of a museum you're doing. So there we are, Clara. The screen is yours.
Right, thank you. Welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm just going to get my presentation up on screen. Bear with me for a second. And can I check that you are able to see the presentation full screen. Hannah's nodding, so I'll take it as yes. And so firstly, I'm here on behalf of Iman Abdullah, my lovely colleague, who unfortunately is unable to make it today, but I shall try to live up to her expectations. So Dadu, the Children's Museum of Qatar. What is our mission? Our mission really is we want to be a resource for children and the families in Qatar. And it's about supporting families, about giving opportunities to each and every child here in Qatar, the opportunity to develop their character, their personality, their ambitions, their talents. Skills and knowledge come into play as well, but also really being a space of family bonding. And if we look at our vision statement, and I'm going to read it out to you. So Dadu Children's Museum of Qatar stimulates and nurtures children to develop creativity, compassion, generosity, trustworthiness, and have the ability to contribute confidently to a sustainable future. So a lot of these, all of these came really stemming from the Qatar National Vision 2030. So there is a vision that has been set out by the government, by the leadership of the country, to transform Qatar into the kind of country that it wants to see with 4 development pillars: human development, social development, economic development, and environmental development. So a lot of work was taken to look at the national vision and the delivery plan to say, okay, what does this actually mean in the context of children today? Who will be adults in 2030, who will have their own ways of contributing to the human, social, economic, and environmental development of the country. What does that actually mean now? And through a lot of consultation with parents, with teachers, with community leaders, with thought leaders in the museums field, in the education field, in the child psychology field, doing a lot of horizon scanning, we came out with our strategic aims for the museum. So I'm going to go through this with you. So family engagement is a huge part of it, because a lot of these values were also drawn from Islamic culture, but also the Arabian culture. So bringing families together and giving them opportunities to bond and spend quality time together through playing is absolute key. Now, we're part of Qatar Museums. I have my lovely colleague, Sheikh Nasser, here today. And we have sister museums like the Museum of Islamic Art, the Qatar National Museum, the Contemporary Art, Arab Art Museum. And really what we see ourselves as is almost the stepping stone to our sister museums. From a young age, we want to bring the vocabulary. We want to bring the habits of visiting museums. We want to bring it into the vernacular and the vocabulary of the children in the country. Now, we then also look at 8 other strategic aims. We're looking at literacy and lifelong learning. Now, when we talk about literacy and lifelong learning, we do not mean phonics. We do not mean learning to read. We do not really mean, the alphabets, Arabic or English. It's about us supporting the schools. It is about us demonstrating the value of literacy, using environmental graphics, using expression opportunities. Books are going to be, readily available, spread out throughout the museum. But everything that we put in there is to serve as a reminder of the importance of literacy, of how enjoyable it can be, and how it can support us in lifelong learning. Creative skills is a huge part of Qatar Museums. We have our sister museum, or Fire Station Museum, Artists in Residence. We have M7, where a lot of design incubators are held. And we want to create the opportunity for children to not just develop their skills, but to express their creativity from a young age. Health and wellness is another big aspect. I think after the last 2.5 years, we all understand that physical wellness is as important. Physical health is important, but really, mental and emotional health is extremely important as well. And so we've been working with the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence to really understand how to be emotion scientists. And this is a part where we walk the talk of lifelong learning. A lot of us who have worked in the museum sector, and a lot of us as working in the museum have been trained to really think about cognitive development. But we have not had the same amount of training and the same amount of research put into actually emotional well-being. And this is an area that we're very actively researching and very actively learning on our own. Excuse me. We believe that confidence, motivation, and leadership is absolutely crucial to the children and youth for today. They need to feel connected. They need to feel that they have a part to play in the world. They need to feel that there is a future for them and they can be leaders. Working in the Children's Museum, we're often told, oh yes, it's so important to invest in children because they are our future. And we say, yes, they absolutely are, but they're also our present. And they can be leaders today if we let them be. They have capacity, they have capability, they just need a platform to shine. Value the environment and sustainability come hand in hand. When we talk about value the environment, we're stepping very much away of instructions of you have to reduce, you have to reuse, you have to recycle. But we are taking a different approach. We are trying to address nature deficit disorder. We're trying to have children reconnect to nature, or at the very best, or at the very least, rather, educate parents and talk to parents to say, listen, children do need to play in the mud. They need to roll around in the sand. It's okay for them to fall off the tree. It's okay for them to scratch, pictures in the dirt with tree branches with their fingers. And to build this connection back to nature, because it is this connection, is this empathy, is this value that they're going to be building for the environment and for the creatures living in the environment that will support them to make those decisions for sustainability, because it's going to be economic sustainability, it's going to be social sustainability, and it has to be environmental sustainability hand in hand. We look at heritage and culture and global citizenship again together. Now, there are so many different groups of children living in Qatar, whether it's in terms of nationalities or ethnicities. There are, of course, Qatari children, but we also have a great number of what we call the children of Qatar, not necessarily being a passport holder, but have been here living 3 generations. And this is what they know. They've got extended family here as well. There are also a lot of children who are on 3-year cycles. So they're here while, dad's here on an oil and gas contract. And then you have everything in between. So what does this mean to the children, to the Qatari children or the children who are here long term, to say goodbye to their classmates every 3 years? Every year, half the class changes. What does that actually mean and feel to them? What does it mean for children who are born here and this is their world, but they're third culture kids? Parents, mom and dad both come from different countries. What does that actually mean when they're here? But then whatever it is, we want to give children that confidence in their self-identity, in their family identity, in their community identity, and also the Qatar national identity, so that they can be global citizens and they have that anchor from which they can confidently engage the world. So you see that a lot of these things that we've addressed, there's a little bit of skills there in literacy and creativity, but really what we are articulating are values. And this is through a lot of consultation with people in Qatar. And it came true where parents and educators said, listen, the education system in Qatar isn't bad, literacy and kids are in school. What is really missing is how do we pass down these values that are really important to our country, to our family, to our communities in such a fast changing world. Some Instagrammers have more, some parents say Instagrammers may have a bit more influence over some of my children than I do. So values comes into play. Now, when we talk about values and when we want children to be developing values and family to be embracing specific values, we also have our own values. And we articulate this to say, this is what we stand for, and this is what we are working towards. Respect for the child. So we have a great, immense respect for the capacities of each individual child. Again, coming back to the statement we said earlier, children are the future, they are also the present. And if we give them the platform, they can do great things from today. We want to be safe and welcoming to all, so that's inclusive and accessible. We want to be uniquely Qatari. So while we have visited Hannah and her amazing establishment, we've taken a lot of her ideas, but they are made specific for the children and families of Qatar, through the lens of which the families here will want to explore these contexts and these exhibits. For us, it's about relationships. Relationships is a huge part of what we do. So we talked about extensive community engagement and consultation with our communities. We also work a lot with allied organizations, whether they're schools, whether it's the Ministry of Education, or whether it's special needs groups, or whether it's community leaders. We are very much open to working with anyone who has an influence with children. Research is at the heart of what we do. So learning from other organizations, learning from Brooklyn, Boston Children's Museum, but also the Children's Museum in Singapore, in Korea, around the world, but also really looking at what does the latest play research tell us? What does the latest child development research tell us? What are the latest thinking around progressive education? And we like to think that we hold ourselves to the highest professional standards, and that may be either as an educator or a museum professional or a designer. So who are our audience? When we talk about families, it's a catch-all term, but we are very specific. For now, where we are still in development phase, we are focusing on children aged 0 to 11. Okay, we do want to engage youth, but right now we feel like this is the provision that is required in the country and where we can make the greatest impact. But it's not just children to 11 years. Well, this is our core audience. We are also looking at family members, caregivers, community organizations, the schools, carers, grandparents, nannies, whoever it is. These are people who have great influence over children's lives. So they are part of that village, just as we are. It takes a village to raise a child. We are all part of this village, and how can we support each other? So what is the one thing that Children's Museum, what is our approach? What's our philosophy? What's our pedagogy? Sheikha Mayasa, our chairperson of Qatar Museums, says, what we learn through childhood, what we learn through play during childhood actually stays with us for life. And we firmly believe this. We believe that play is the way that children unpack, experiences, and it's the way they express what they know, it's the way they experiment to find their boundaries, and it's the way they will test relationships. So where does this take us? Our galleries, which we have been designed to be extremely playful. Now, Hannah said that you're one of the few collecting children's museums. We are not a collecting children's museum. So we have a no acquisitions policy, but we have an immense collection throughout Qatar Museums, which we can draw on. And this is what we want to do. So you'll see dinosaur fossils in the background, and we are, using fossils from the natural history collection. But instead of interpreting them, and this is where the design and interpretation come from, instead of interpreting them by saying, okay, in a natural history museum, you talk about the name of this dinosaur, which period did it live in, what did it eat, who did it live with, what were its nearest, living kind of relatives. But we will have that information, but that information is foundational and it's basic. What we want to do is to link them to the other experiences. So in this gallery, we're looking at just one of the exhibits, Story Trees, where we want to give children the opportunity to be, to have literacy-rich moments. These might be reading books. This might be expressing themselves, putting on a costume and acting out the play. It might be sitting down at one of the scribble boards and creating their own storyboards. But we have a dinosaur there to encourage them to tell the story of the dinosaur, to act like a dinosaur, to make up, to use this to create whatever story they may have to tell. On the right-hand side, you see the Maya-saur that sits within the early years area, and the Maya-saur is known as good mother lizard or good omelette eater. We scientists don't really know, but this dinosaur has always been found near nest of eggs. And in this case, in this exhibit, we bring in the idea of stories and communication as well. So there's going to be a little interactive where you can say, you can record something that you say, and you might record to say, hello, little one, and you can change the frequency, you can change the amplitude, you can affect the squash, you can put it through different kind of sound systems to distort it, and you can make it sound really panic. So that's how do children think mothers who are warning of danger sound? How do mothers speak when they're trying to calm down a child? So these are the ways they can then express what they know about the world, but also what they think, what are their ideas. We also are looking at physical activity. We have a big climber indoors. Before anyone panics and think about suing, because I know we have quite a few American audiences here, there is a safety net around the whole climber. We just didn't put it in the renders because it just looks prettier. But in this instance, having physical play indoors is extremely crucial in Qatar. Today it's 50 degrees outside. We've got dust storms for the last 3 days. Ministry of Public Health has said don't spend any time outdoors as much as you can. But we need to have these opportunities indoors, which is why we dedicate a big amount of space for this. those of you who are familiar with this is the lucky climber. And the design of such a climber is that the leaves, the climbers on the lower level are actually closer together, which means if you're a younger child, you have less confidence, you have less physical ability, you can climb up to a certain height. It starts to get wider, it starts to get harder, it needs more risk-taking after a certain level. And if you don't feel that you're there, it's fine. Your body gets the message. It's a visceral reaction. You can choose to come down at any time and explore a different path. And this is one of the ways we know that children will come back again and again. They're going to come back at age 2, they're going to come back at age 5, and they're going to come back at age 10, because even the exhibit looks the same, it's going to be a different challenge for them.
Clara, thank you so much. I'm afraid we're going to have to move on to our next presentation. Maybe we can capture some of the other things in your comments afterwards. I want to give Sheikh Nasser an opportunity to present, but I am so pleased that you covered so thoroughly the emotional and social support that children's museums and this kind of education provides, so that we have what we call good future members of society. So hopefully we can touch on that. I'm particularly interested in what you're going to be doing with nature and the planet and the creatures that may not all be around when these children grow into adults. So let me move on to our third speaker, Sheikh Nasser of the Museum of Islamic Art in Doha. You have a special challenge. Have what I consider very sophisticated collections, and you have to make them relevant for children. So please, we look forward to your presentation. I think you're on mute, if you can hear me.
Yes, okay, yes, I was on mute.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Peggy, and good morning to those of you in the United States, and good evening to everyone in Doha. So let me start by sharing my presentation. Okay, so it is my pleasure to be talking to you today about how the Museum of Islamic Art is becoming a family-friendly museum, which is a key part of the major renovation project that is currently under construction and will be delivered in fall this year, just before the World Cup. I'll start by giving a brief background about MIA's main reasons for going under the relaunch, keeping focus on families. Then I'll talk about our main aims of the project. And after that, I'll highlight the strategies we are applying to enhance the family experience from the moment they enter the museum, starting with the facilities, then focusing on galleries. And finally, I'll talk about our plans to engage family through programming and reutilizing some of the areas in our site. I'd like to start with sharing an image of the museum galleries, in case you haven't been or seen them before. And I'd like to ask you a question. How would you feel if you are visiting the museum with the children aged 7 or 12? Take a moment to look at these images, and you can write to me in the chat box how the experience will be. So I have a few images here. I can tell you one thing immediately, that they are so beautifully designed. There is no doubt about that. But how would you feel if you are with kids? So it is. So our gallery, maybe I can say that our galleries are designed in a theatrical approach, with the objects surrounding are being quite dark. But here it's in the morning that there is light, but at the evening it's a quite dark galleries, with providing minimum information. So the beauty of the objects will speak for itself. So this was the approach of the designer. The content provided in the labels is minimal, very limited. It's only tombstone information with the date, country, and materials. So after the opening, we began to notice some engagement issues, especially with family visitors, who are one of our main visitor groups in the first place comparing to others. So we decided to conduct evaluations using different methodologies and with the assistance of international companies specialized in understanding museums and improving the visitor experience. The results showed that the visitors have a fleeting level of engagement in some areas, and they learn very little about Islamic art, history, and culture. And some finish their engagement with an object without knowing its significance, how or for whom it's made, to the extent some of them felt quite frustrated with the lack of information. Especially with families, they found that the museum visits were quite passive. Children and younger audience are core audience segment for us, and they were not catered for in our permanent galleries. And we were compensating for this lack through our exhibitions and programs, but galleries remained an issue. After further studies and consultations for around 5 years, we've decided to embark on the Renovation Project to improve the museum facilities, security, access, improving the wayfinding, signage, and utilizing areas that were not used before. Most importantly, enhance the visitor experience inside the galleries by creating innovative solutions to attract families. Some of our main goals for families are to create a holistic family-friendly experience from the moment they enter the museum with the facilities, such as dedicating breastfeeding and changing rooms, providing suitable meals selection for families in the cafe and inside the galleries that I'll talk about in more details. Cater for different learning styles by incorporating a wide variety of learning methodologies, such as video, sound, fragrance, and tactile experiences. Develop the next generation of regular museum goers by creating memorable experiences, encouraging engagement to a deeper level with objects related to personal experiences. And finally, provide features for families to explore the collection together and through encouraging discussion. The museum experts have found that family visits send messages to children that museums are an important part of life experience. So the strategies or the approaches that we have applied to meet these main goals are, we created a family trail to guide the families through the galleries, and it included 3 key elements. We came up with the idea of creating family characters from our collection, such as the falcon or the hind, which is means the female deer, illustrated in a distinct way for families to recognize and guide them through their visits. And these characters will appeal in a special family label that will encourage reflection and discussion with some of the objects. The content on the label will be written in a child level that is easy to read or to be read and understood. We all know that children will not read all the labels, so we have alternative solution, and that is to create 11 interactive stations across the galleries for families to learn about various themes related to Islamic arts. And the dots highlighted here in the slides are where the interactive stations will be implemented. It was quite challenging for us because the Museum of Islamic Art is not designed for this station, so we had to find the places to fit this station. And we've categorized them into 4 main approaches. The first one is to create.
Sheikha, we have some feedback coming. I'm not sure if it's from your computer or someone else's. It's only when you're speaking. Is there any button that's turned on that could be turned off?
I don't know, but now we have the call to prayer, so I don't know if
Oh,
you
maybe
can hear.
that's it. All right. Okay, please continue.
Yes, it's the evening call to prayer. So we have to, maybe I speak louder, using imagination when creating processes and activities such as create your own palace, where children can select patterns, design and material to create 15th century palace. And then families could also design their own garden by underlaying the garden features to come up with the Al-Hamra garden. And then we have magnify to encourage a close looking, as in a coin experience to explore all the details and have even the opportunity to mint your own coin. And then we have hide and reveal to learn about astronomy, navigation, and use the astrolabe by directing a replica at a star map. And then once you point at the star correctly, a constellation will appear. Then we have finally to contemplate with the smell stations where visitor are asked to guess the smell. Then the name of the spice will appear with the information that explain about the trading routes and all. These are just a selection of the family interactive stations, but we have more. And then we have developed crook steps where they will be placed across the museum to allow children to get closer to the objects and get a better engagement with them. These approaches will provide many levels of engagement and give variety that will allow activities to be used many times, each time experiencing a different outcome and encouraging repeated visits. The family trail will be supported by an additional booklet for visitors, as they can either use it during their visit or after. Outside of the main galleries, we have repurposed one of the rooms on the 4th floor of the museum that haven't been used since the museum was open, to create a multi-purpose workshop space to be used for children and teens. Being so close to the galleries, we allow us to extend learning spaces over several floors, giving incredible flexibility to our programs. We will also offer a long-term teen programs to encourage those who want to work on a broader field, as well as a space for them to meet and create their own activities. With the relaunch of the museum, we have taken the opportunity to create a new trail and family activities, which put the whole family experience at the center of the program, as well as the family trail interactive, where we offer a family kits to enjoy the galleries in a non-technical way, such as the I Spy bag or the chatterboxes. They are not focused just on children, but on families enjoying themselves together. We also extend to our online offer with the jigsaw games and family suggestions for post-visit activities. To conclude, children are our next generation of museum goers. And if they visit the museum with their parents, the experience will be more memorable part of their lives. Families and children are one of the main audience segments. So it is our own role to provide different platforms through programming, exhibition, and in the galleries for them to learn, engage, explore, to be inspired by Islamic art, history, and culture.
Thank you, Sheikha. Thank you so much. I want to ask you a quick question before we move on to all of our questions for everyone. Your title is Deputy Director of Curatorial Affairs, in the early days, probably before you were born, educators didn't talk to curators and curators didn't talk to educators in museums. The curators now are very pro-education, it seems, and educators are very interested in collections and research. So do you encompass education and collections in your role? Do both of those departments function with you?
No, we have, so the museum, we have 3 divisions: curatorial affairs and learning and outreach, where they have the education department. But for this project, especially the relaunch, we work together and collaboratively so much, especially for families and program where we become, we work very closely with the curators and the education team. So it is not, we are not, even though they are separate departments, but we are like one team, one project team, where they are involved in every stage of developing, especially the family trail. There are some, curators have different approaches and point of views, and learning, they have different, but we always focus that the audiences and families are our main focus, and we do what is best for them, and we have to compromise with some of the teams to make sure that we meet with our main goals.
Well, carry on. So far, so good. And it's so great to see the MIA interested in these programs, and especially in those smaller interactive galleries that you're establishing around the museum. The first question from the audience, Hannah, I'm going to direct to you. It's a very simple question, but it may be more complicated. Maybe it's more appropriate for a parent to answer it than for a museum professional. I'm not sure who of you or both, but is there a point in time when a child says, I'm too old for a children's museum?
Well, sadly, that is a reality of this business. I recently attended the Association of Children's Museums conference, their annual conference, and that is always a topic of conversation, how you extend the relationship with families of kids of early childhood age with the institution. And there's some ways that we really have intentionally scaled up our exhibit development to reach a slightly older audience. Our new exhibits, we're thinking as 5 to 10 as our target age, whereas historically, we've defined early childhood as 0 to 8, with really 2 to 6 as our sweet spot. So I think that programming, permanent exhibit development, and then programming as a layer on top of that can extend the age range of exhibits. We also have a teen program, so we engage high school age students. And even though sometimes they have a reaction to, oh, this place, I came here as a kid, it's not for me anymore, our collection really is a point of great engagement for high school age students who can also, having their presence in the museum to serve as mentors, and for younger kids to see older kids and sort of chart their own milestone path ahead, I think is a very positive thing. But the reality is that our core audience does change out over time in a more dynamic way than other kinds of museums.
Oh, thank you for that. That's I'm not surprised. It's good. This question is for anyone who wants to answer it. There are those in the audience who want to know how you would advise them to pursue a career in a children's museum or working in programs with children. Should it be child psychology? Should it be museology? Should it be science if they want to go into a science center? What would you advise? Anyone want to take that question?
Well, I'm happy to take the first pass of the question.
Yes. Okay.
There are quite a few and an increasing number of academic programs that are museum focused, whether they're museum studies or the like. But I think the truth is that people come to the museum world through many diverse and circuitous channels. And that's in some ways the beauty of museum work, is that it really is at its core interdisciplinary work that combines so many different fields and disciplines. And so, while traditional academic programs have so much merit and really introduce you to so many different facets of museum work, there's also so much practical experience to be gained in a hands-on way through different informal learning environments, whether that's through volunteering at a museum or another cultural site that does family engagement, or it may even be through a different mode, through a community center, through a library, any place that's interacting with families or kids of young age will give you some really valuable experience that can then be applied to the museum context.
From the Dadu Children's Museum's point, there are very few programs here in Qatar that there's no, in terms of museum education or even child development psychology. there is a teaching university, so you can train to be an educator, you can train to be a teacher. So we do not have the same wide range of programs that's available perhaps in the USA. But the team that the Children's Museum team, the Dadu team, it comes from a vast number of different backgrounds. We have fashion designers, we have graphic designers, we have interior designers, we have a couple of engineers, we have chemical scientists. The important thing we feel is the passion for the beliefs of the museum, that we are working for children, we are working for families, and we are able to be role models. We're able to bring the skills and our knowledge, but we also have to bring an incredible capacity to learn, not just from each other, but from the people outside of the field. We also talked about within our museum, working for children and working with children. And the way we sort of look at it is not everyone who is as passionate and has a lot to contribute is actually natural and comfortable to be working directly with children. And that's okay, because we have a lot of work to be doing back of house. If you do understand child development psychology, or you do understand it is, certain things that can support in curriculum development, design of a workshop, engineering of an exhibit, great. You don't have to be front and center working with children. So a lot of times people say, do I have to work with children directly? We'll go, no, but at some point you will have to interact with children. When you're prototyping, you have to see how the children are taking it, but you do not have to be there with a child every day.
The other thing that comes to mind is, are we staying ahead of these kids with technology? They are so smart today, smarter than most adults. And you're doing design, Clara, so you really have to stay on top of all the IT issues and things. But how's Brooklyn doing with the interactive situation that you've got there, which is expensive? Did you hear me, Hannah?
Yes. So we've determined that really we think that our strength is to really focus our design and our exhibit interactive experiences on the most tactile. So we have over time really taken out a lot of the technology, which quite honestly, our current permanent exhibits were developed in 2006 and opened in 2008. Between that time, the iPhone was introduced, and the technology that was presented on the floor and the software that was developed was really outdated the moment the museum opened its doors. So we have really found that our better foot forward is through hands-on tactile experiences that are sensory activated.
Oh, thank you. Okay, well, I am afraid that we are out of time. We've put in a full hour. It was fascinating. Thank you all for your discussion. May I end by basically thanking you all. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Clara. Thank you, Sheikha. Wonderful presentations, and I think very instructive for people who want to follow this line in a career. I also want to thank our audience for your interest in today's subject, and ask you to stay in touch with QAIC and remain up to date on our future activities, events, and the resources that we offer. So you can easily subscribe to our website, and be sure to also follow us on our Qatar America platforms. So shortly you'll be able to see this webinar on those platforms. And I think that the phrase often refers to in developing children's museums and children's programs is something that I've known for many years, and you probably all know it too, but I'd like to leave our audience with it. It's I hear, I forget, I see, I remember, I do, and I understand. So goodbye to all, and thanks again for joining, and always remain curious. Thank you.